All right, I feel like we've been reading Chesterton for a long time. So I started pretty young. How about you? You start pretty young?
A little bit. A lot younger than I am now.
Yeah. It's almost as if we've been reading Chesterton from boys to men.
No, I knew there was a bad pun coming.
I should have started sooner. Never been a real romantic Chesterton song yet, you know?
Close your eyes. Let's get mystic. Don't be atheistic. For tonight I'll be your apostle of common sense.
The weirdest romantic song I've ever heard in my life.
All through the night, eat the cheese with the bread, girl. All things considered, don't ball and I won't get cross.
Don't ball and I won't get cross.
I will do anything. Girl, let's get drunk on wonder. I'm your Chesterton. You're my paradox. Let's get orthodox. I'm your everlasting man. I'll be your GK, the man who was Thursday. Absent-mindedness is just presence of mind.
Try that one.
To another episode of Chesterton's Gateway with Ethan, Nicolle and Michael Grumbine. This book will take you from boys to men. The Ethics of Elfland chapter.
Well, you can stop there. I forgot that Chesterton was going to step on my joke. I stepped on his joke. Oops.
On the floor,
There's
I'm gonna take off my cape. I've made plans to be with you. Girl, whatever you ask me, you
I'm working on my Chesterton Boys to Men. He's wearing all white, little black sunglasses. And then, yeah, this one's fully based on what's it?
I'm your
I'll make love to you.
everlasting.
Yeah, it's one of their most happiest.
I'll be your GK, the man who was Thursday.
All right, well, it's us. We're in Ethics of Elfland, so it's a little steamy in here.
Yep. There's a lot of water in Elfland.
The same will revolve. Let's make magic. That's a play that
The real
I
truth for all of our listeners is we just do these podcasts so we can listen to cool music at the beginning.
Yeah. Stupid jokes.
Holy mackerel. Oh man, that's a cancelable one. Eugenics is evil.
That just means really sexy.
Man, we're gonna one of these times. There's gonna get the wrong.
Yeah, if you want to hear all the lyrics to that song, you can check it out on the Spotify or Apple Music or Amazon. All the music things, it's out there. Look up Chesterton's Gateway as a band and not as a podcast or audiobook. And here we are. We're in the. I guess technically it's the fourth chapter, but I'm calling it the third chapter because the first chapter is an introduction. So we are on chapter 3, Ethics of Elfland. So I don't know if we want to do any kind of lead in on this. This is
this is our favorite, right?
Yeah, it's definitely one of the aspects of Chesterton that I love the most, but I also feel like it's an aspect of this book that every time I read it, I start to wrap my head around a little more what he's actually saying. Because at first you're like really kind of confused. If you're like me, you're like, I like what he's saying, but I'm so confused by it.
Well, for me, and I was confused too, but it was too rich. There were so many. There's so much, like you could take a paragraph and you could have a whole, hours long discussion about a couple sentences that he has in paragraph. And so when I was trying to read it as a book the first time, it's like eating too much caviar or something. It's just the food's too rich.
Well, the interesting thing is too is that he's actually explaining something simple often, but he does it in a very rich way.
That's right.
and you're like, and he kind of takes a bunch of different swings at it from different ways. You don't realize he's getting all at the same point. He's so roundabout everything.
Right,
Anyway.
right. It's like a home run derby or something, and where they're like, he's like, yeah, pitch it to me slow. Then he just cracks it out of the park. Now give me the same pitch again. I'll show you a different side. You can hit it in a different direction. And you can. So
Yeah.
he's like keeps going at the same truths, but from different angles. And I think it's now this particular one I think is fun because I'm very partial to the world of the imagination and to a sense of wonder, which is going to be the one of the pivotal principles of this chapter.
It also contains, which will be in this episode, another, we've gone over Chesterton's lamppost, Chesterton's chimney, Chesterton's fence. We have in this, the democracy of the dead is another very famous Chestertonian concept. So we'll be touching on that. It'll be a big theme. But also, yeah, it's a beautifully written chapter. It's fun to hear Chesterton go where he loves to go. And this is you could tell, like, as he said that last chapter was a bit of a, thank God it's over. You could tell he had fun writing this one. And we actually have, I think on the third part of this chapter, we're going to have a guest, my friend Christopher Ouellette, I think that's how you say it. He runs Chesterton stage productions. They do a bunch of plays. They do Chesterton plays. They made one of my books into a play randomly. But he's a huge Chesterton fan. And then for the final episode of this chapter, we're getting Dale Ahlquist, the president of the Chesterton Society. He's going to come on because this is one of his favorite chapters. So,
which is awesome.
And when I asked people, what's your favorite Chesterton? I got, 2 people that could do it. We're like, Ethics of Elfland, of course. So now that we've oversold it, you ready to start?
Well, yeah, just you and I for this chapter.
That's right. Just us for this, just for this part of this chapter. Part 1, sorry to disappoint you. At least you got Boys to Chesterton. There we go.
When the businessman rebukes the idealism of his office boy, it is commonly in some such speech as this. Ah, yes, when one is young, one has these ideals in the abstract and these castles in the air. But in middle age, they all break up like clouds, and one comes down to a belief in practical politics, to using the machinery one has and getting on with the world as it is. Thus, at least, venerable and philanthropic old men now in their honored graves used to talk to me when I was a boy. But since then, I have grown up and have discovered that these philanthropic old men were telling lies. What has really happened is exactly the opposite of what they said would happen. They said that I should lose my ideals and begin to believe in the methods of practical politicians. Now I have not lost my ideals in the least. My faith in fundamentals is exactly what it always was. What I have lost is my old childlike faith in practical politics. I am still as much concerned as ever about the Battle of Armageddon, but I am not so much concerned about the general election. As a babe, I leapt up on my mother's knee at the mere mention of it. No. The vision is always solid and reliable. The vision is always a fact. It is the reality that is often a fraud. As much as I ever did, more than I ever did, I believe in liberalism. But there was a rosy time of innocence when I believed in liberals.
I think that's a good thing to latch onto. This is the vision, the vision versus the reality. The thing that we seem to know about reality, the thing that comes almost with this life. There's almost an unspoken thing about reality that I think that's what he means by the vision. Even that's hard to explain, and that's why it takes so long, I guess.
Yeah. So
your ideals,
yes, yeah,
those rosy idealism, and the idea that there's this meaning and things behind the world, and you just kind of give up on that, and you just go for practical politics. He says that didn't happen to me; it happened the other way around.
Which I think makes Chesterton is a little unusual on that. Like
True.
The message that he's telling us that the old men used to tell him is mostly true of most people. Most people become jaded as they get older. They lose their desire to hold firmly to ideals, maybe some ideals anyway, and they sort of give into but what works, what's practical. Let's set aside our vision of the way things ought to be, and let's just work with some kind of compromise that we can make. And Chesterton's unusual. He sticks to his ideals, and for him the ideals are more real than the practical reality. And there's a bit of that in me too, I have to admit. Like that's part of what I have a lot of practical concerns in my life, with my family, with my community, with my friends. God's put in my life, with my church, but ultimately, the things that matter the most are these ideals, and I'm with Chesterton on that. But it is an interesting way to put it, and it's a funny way to start a chapter. He's going to go more into what he means by liberal, then, but suffice it to say, it just comes from the word free. A person that was a liberal believed in freedom of thought. Freedom of
mainly because it meant a different thing then than what we think now.
Right. It doesn't equate to the left wing of a political spectrum the way it does now in America.
It doesn't mean AOC.
Yeah. Now the left side of the political spectrum in America has claimed that word, and the right has honored that claim by calling, but that's not what he meant. He just meant a classical liberal, someone that believes in freedom and self-determination.
Got it.
So, anyway.
Okay. We'll continue.
I take this instance of one of the enduring faiths because, having now to trace the roots of my personal speculation, this may be counted, I think, as the only positive bias. I was brought up a liberal and have always believed in democracy, in the elementary liberal doctrine of a self-governing humanity. If anyone finds the phrase vague or threadbare, I can only pause for a moment to explain that the principle of democracy, as I mean it, can be stated in two propositions. The first is this, that the things common to all men are more important than the things peculiar to any men. Ordinary things are more valuable than extraordinary things. Nay, they are more extraordinary. Man is something more awful than men, something more strange. The sense of the miracle of humanity itself should be always more vivid to us than any marvels of power, intellect, art, or civilization. The mere man on two legs, as such, should be felt as something more heartbreaking than any music and more startling than any caricature. Death is more tragic even than death by starvation. Having a nose is more comic even than having a Norman nose.
The Norman nose is a funny nose?
In a way, yeah. It's long and thin. So it was based on...
We'll do an overlay.
Some rather unflattering portraits of William the Conqueror, who came from Normandy in 1066 to conquer England. So, and then the Normans had these helmets where they had these long, thin they could to cover their noses, and they were famously long and thin pieces of metal that came down from the helmet. So a Norman nose was caricatured to be this long, thin nose.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, this is a hard concept here, at least at first blush, but it's worth, if you're reading this chapter for the first time, or even for the second or third, it's worth kind of dwelling in this, which he says that the first thing, this is a principle of democracy, this is his first proposition. The things common to all men are more important than the things peculiar to any man. So he's saying the universal things are more important than the particular things that you live your life with and by. So any peculiar strength or weakness you have, any peculiar way of being that's unique or at least particular to you, is less valuable than what's the ordinary things.
Yeah, just man.
The fact that we're
thing,
how we move around. Our very existence and our ability to take the universe into our minds through our intellect. Death is a tragedy. Just the idea of this, we have a sense that we're created in God, that we have a divine spark in us, and we're created in God's image and likeness. As Christians, we believe that. But there's and so there's a powerful tragedy about death, that someone created in God's image and likeness with a divine spark should end. And that's way more tragic than having even a Roman nose, or a death, to be perfectly blunt. He says death by starvation. So watching a particular man die of a horrible death like starvation is not worse than the idea that men should die. So this is an interesting concept, because he's pointing out that the universal truth is more important than the particular truth, is more valuable than the particular, which is a very interesting proposition.
Yeah, I find that, because I feel like seeing man that way is like the chief aim of sin is to not make you see man that way. Like sin condition pulls us from that, to see man as an animal, as just another beast, as just or whatever, or to pursue power or whatever. But to see you, to kind of see it as this miracle, I feel like that's like one of the things about Chesterton. There's something in his nature that makes him different than normal people. I know they've talked about there's people that want to make him a saint. They want to Saint Chesterton, and I wonder if that.
We're going to have one of those guys on the podcast.
Oh yeah, he wants to make. Yeah, I wonder his argument, because I heard each saint has to have a miracle they've performed, right? And
say again.
I thought saints had to have each one has to have a miracle that they've. Is that like two miracles? Okay. I guess some of the things like that are just part of Chesterton's nature, things he just sees that nobody else sees, I almost would consider. I mean, I'm not a Catholic, so I don't care who's a saint, not a saint, but it's interesting.
You don't own that, but yeah, it is his superpower. That's very true.
Yeah. There's certain things that come effortlessly to him that people spend their whole lives trying to wrap their head around.
He sees these deep truths, that all of us miss, or most of us miss most of the time.
Mm-hmm. All right, continuing on.
This is the first principle of democracy, that the essential things in men are the things they hold in common, not the things they hold separately. And the second principle is merely this, that the political instinct or desire is one of these things which they hold in common. Falling in love is more poetical than dropping into poetry. The democratic contention is that government helping to rule the tribe is a thing like falling in love, and not a thing like dropping into poetry. It is not something analogous to playing the church organ, painting on vellum, discovering the North Pole, that insidious habit, looping the loop, being astronomer royal, and so on. For these things, we do not wish a man to do at all unless he does them well.
Yeah, that's for sure.
It is, on the contrary, a thing analogous to writing one's own love letters or blowing one's own nose. These things we want a man to do for himself, even if he does them badly. I am not here arguing the truth of any of these conceptions. I know that some moderns are asking to have their wives chosen by scientists, and they may soon be asking, for all I know, to have their noses blown by nurses. I merely say that mankind does recognize these universal human functions, and that democracy classes government among them. In short, the democratic faith is this, that the most terribly important things must be left to ordinary men themselves. The mating of the sexes, the rearing of the young, the laws of the state. This is democracy, and in this I have always believed.
So this is one of the best arguments for democracy I ever heard, and I only really caught it deeply the third time I read Orthodoxy.
I probably haven't caught it yet then, so yeah, expound.
Yeah, it's this idea that the ordinary things, the things that we hold in common that are common to all men, or ought to be, these are the most important things, and they should be left to all men and not to the specialists. You definitely want, having just gone to a wedding with a fantastic organist, hey William, he's my brother-in-law, and he listens to this, but
No. Hello.
you definitely want a specialist playing a church organ. You definitely want a specialist creating a painting on vellum, a medieval manuscript, or an explorer heading off into the Arctic, or looping the loop, which is where we get the word loop de loop, which is it's when a plane does a full circle. For a whole full vertical circle is a loop, looping the loop, as they called it in Britain. Being the astronomer royal, the head astronomer in England, and so on. You do want specialists for all those things, and each of those things are worthy in themselves. But the most important things, writing love letters. Funnily enough, taking care of your own body, blowing one's nose. He says it as a joke here, but the mating of the sexes, the rearing of young, the education and rearing of the young, and making laws. This is the work of all men, of all ordinary people. And I love it. It's a wonderful.
Yeah, he has an essay about the jury, and they kind of talk about the same thing.
Exactly.
So this decision's so important that you can't, it's above the experts.
You can't leave it to the experts.
Yeah,
you need it to go. It's so funny because he's so prescient, because that's been one of the banes of our existence for especially the last couple decades. The more and more the media tries to tell us that we shouldn't have an opinion, we should leave it to the experts on the most important things. And Chesterton just slaps them down casually here, 100 years before they actually came up with the idea, or this particular idea in America. But slaps them down saying, no, actually, it's these things of democracy, these things about education of the young, these things about marriage and family and taking care of yourself. These are the things left to everyone, not to the experts.
All right, well, buckle your chest belts if you haven't read this before, because I know the first time I read it, I did that Keanu Reeves meme, like, whoa, bro. All right, so we're diving into the Democracy of the Dead. Here it is.
But there is one thing that I have never from my youth up been able to understand. I have never been able to understand where people got the idea that democracy was in some way opposed to tradition. It is obvious that tradition is only democracy extended through time. It is trusting to a consensus of common human voices rather than to some isolated or arbitrary record. The man who quotes some German historian against the tradition of the Catholic Church, for instance, is strictly appealing to aristocracy. He is appealing to the superiority of one expert against the awful authority of a mob. It is quite easy to see why a legend is treated, and ought to be treated, more respectfully than a book of history. The legend is generally made by the majority of people in the village who are sane. The book is generally written by the one man in the village who is mad. Those who urge against tradition that men in the past were ignorant may go and urge it at the Carlton Club, along with the statement that voters in the slums are ignorant. It will not do for us. If we attach great importance to the opinion of ordinary men in great unanimity, when we are dealing with daily matters, there is no reason why we should disregard it when we are dealing with history or fable. Tradition may be defined as an extension of the franchise. Tradition means giving votes to the most obscure of all classes, our ancestors. It is the democracy of the dead. Tradition refuses to submit to the small and arrogant oligarchy of those who merely happen to be walking about. All Democrats object to men being disqualified by the accident of birth. Tradition objects to their being disqualified by the accident of death. Democracy tells us not to neglect a good man's opinion, even if he is our groom. Tradition asks us not to neglect a good man's opinion, even if he is our father. I, at any rate, cannot separate the two ideas of democracy and tradition. It seems evident to me that they are the same idea. We will have the dead at our councils. The ancient Greeks voted by stones. These shall vote by tombstones. It is all quite regular and official, for most tombstones, like most ballot papers, are marked with a cross.
So has to throw a little joke at the end there.
This is I don't have a lot to add to this. He just he makes the point just very well that democracy. I mean, I will say one thing, which is that he says at the beginning, and it's a rhetorical way of speaking. But he says in the second sentence of this paragraph, I've never been able to understand where people got the idea that democracy was in some way opposed to tradition. I do. And I think he does too. But it's because with democracy, the idea is you can always change things, right? You can always have something new. And so people in a childish way, they're like, oh, something new as opposed to something old, which is tradition. So these are opposed to each other.
Yeah. If you want the fad today, the fad of right now to be voted into law.
So you can see how the fad chosen by the mob of democracy today is different from the democracy of the dead chosen by the people of yesteryear. But his point is fantastic, which is these are people too. They were our fathers and our forefathers.
Why does your democracy end? It just who happens to be alive right now.
Exactly.
Like the concept stretches out over time. That's what I find fascinating about the fact, as a Christian, that we have a Bible, we have this book that, I mean, help me out. Would it be as if a book started being written in the time of like Aristotle and finally got finished today, like the amount of time that passes inside the Bible?
The amount of time in the Bible, yeah. So you're talking, not quite Aristotle, but you're talking well over, over 1,000 years. But
it's just so bizarre to think, like, a few hundred years ago was like slavery ending and America being created and stuff like that. It's not that long ago, and the Bible is like multiple of that time frame. It's just crazy how much time. And these are generations and generations. This is Democracy of the Dead saying this. These are important words. This stuff has affected our culture and our way of life and how we see the world. And this is what we pass on and pass on and pass on and pass on. And there's something so amazing to have that thing.
That piece of wisdom. And now you know why I'm always, for those that don't know us personally, I'm always waxing on about the great books and the ideas of Western civilization in the classical liberal arts, because that's what it is. It's the democracy of the dead. It is, here's the wisdom of the Bible from thousands of years ago. Here's the wisdom of the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans and the people from centuries ago in the medieval world and the Renaissance and the Enlightenment. And they have a say in our lives. In fact, the reason our culture has reached the heights it has is because we respected the democracy of the dead and their ideas. That's the whole reason we came up with concepts like innocent until proven guilty from the 12th century, and all the ideas in our American Bill of Rights and our government. They were from previous centuries because people respected the traditions of the past. And so if you think that you should throw out everything and just do whatever you feel like that's new, or there's something wrong with an old thing, the problem is with you. And the world that you're going to live in, if you live that way, is going to be a sad one.
All right, we'll keep going.
I have first to say, therefore, that if I have had a bias, it was always a bias in favor of democracy, and therefore of tradition. Before we come to any theoretic or logical beginnings, I am content to allow for that personal equation. I have always been more inclined to believe the ruck of hard-working people than to believe that special and troublesome literary class to which I belong. I prefer even the fancies and prejudices of the people who see life from the inside to the clearest demonstrations of the people who see life from the outside. I would always trust the old wives' fables against the old maids' facts. As long as wit is mother wit, it can be as wild as it pleases.
What is mother wit? I don't know what that means.
It's actually just an old English word for common sense. It's the ability to deal with
mother wit,
with normal everyday stuff, practical wisdom, prudence.
Yeah, this was when I moved to Portland. I was so excited because all these comic artists would get together. They do drinking draws. There's even famous artists that I was a fan of my whole life that were going to be hanging out, having coffee or beer or whatever, and sketching. And we all draw pictures of each other's characters. And I went to this, and I think I've mentioned it in the past, but this reminds me of it when he talks about being part of this this class, or the class to which he belongs, the special and troublesome, whatever he calls them,
literary class.
the literary class. Yeah. So I was part of this comic book, or I guess the artist class or the artistic class or whatever it is. Had become one of them. This was before AXCOT, but I had a nomination for an award, kind of basically the Oscar of comics and comedy. So I was well known enough. I was published on a label everybody knew about, and so I was indie cool. But man, their disdain for like normal people, and it's where I came from. I came from a small town, and I loved these normal people, and it really like rubbed me the wrong way. The elitism and the snobbishness.
It's so interesting how people in these small subgroups, like I found the same thing with historians when I was in graduate school. Like the snobbishness is, all you guys are doing is reading old books and writing down your conclusions.
And the reason you get to be this thing, like this trivial, like historian isn't a trivial job, but it is a luxury to be able to have somebody who spends all their time doing just that.
Exactly.
Like that job, just like a comic book artist, is built on a massive structure of all these other people with all this other infrastructure of history and things that have come to a point in civilization where we get to have the luxury of having people that spend all their time doing these things that are purely there just to teach us history or entertain us or whatever. It's just so bizarre to not see that and to just think
it's so strange. I mean, it'd be one thing if you would just hold yourself equal to what Chesterton calls the ruck of hardworking people. But these small subgroups whose whole livelihood depends upon, like you're saying, an entire culture of hardworking people, the blue collars that support you and create the economy that you can actually read books all day long or draw pictures all day long.
Yeah, take out your trash.
It's the fact that you would be arrogant about that is unreal to me, and I hated it when I was in academia.
Yeah, I hated it when I was in community college for one term. That's all I got. All right, this is the final part of this episode. Here we go.
Now I have to put together a general position, and I pretend to know training in such things. I propose to do it, therefore, by writing down one after another the 3 or 4 fundamental ideas which I have found for myself, pretty much in the way that I found them. Then I shall roughly synthesize them, summing up my personal philosophy or natural religion. Then I shall describe my startling discovery that the whole thing had been discovered before. It had been discovered by Christianity. But of these profound persuasions, which I have to recount in order, the earliest was concerned with this element of popular tradition. And without the foregoing explanation touching tradition and democracy, I could hardly make my mental experience clear. As it is, I do not know whether I can make it clear, but I now propose to try.
Cliffhanger. Bah, bah, bah.
Exactly.
So, but yeah, note what he says here, because he doesn't do this very often in his writing. He tells you exactly what he's going to do.
Yeah, it's interesting. Although, be careful with Chesterton when he does that. He also told us he was going to defend the Apostles' Creed in the beginning. And I don't think he actually ever gets to that point in his book.
But I think he only says that when he uses the word orthodoxy, he means. But does he say he's going to actually defend it?
Well, he says he's going to defend the orthodoxy that he came to, and then he said that the only way to define it is the one summed up in the Apostles' Creed. So, but what's interesting is I don't think he's wrong. I think he's just talking about the foundation stones of those beliefs, not the particulars of those beliefs. Right. But anyway, it's Chesterton. So, but I agree with you. So the first of the 3 or 4 fundamental ideas, then, can we say what it is? So he says he's just said it. The first of the 3 or 4 fundamental ideas that made up his national.
This element of popular tradition.
What's that?
This element of popular tradition, is that the first?
And it's the fact that popular tradition is the foundation of. It's the same as democracy. It's the will of the common man over time.
Okay.
That you can't. If you come up with a theory, I mean, I'm going to put it in my own words now, but if you come up with a theory about the way the world is, which is nothing, that's what a philosophy is, that's what a theology is. It's a theory about the way the universe is. You can't do that for Chesterton, or he can't do that without respecting the democracy of the dead, without saying, whatever I think has to be consonant, it has to match in some way anyway, the wisdom of the past. So that's one of his principles. So, and our next time we will do the second principle.
Can't wait. Sounds romantic.
Is that what it sounds like? Makes me want to sway.
Put your hands in your heart like this. What's up, the volume? I meant to turn the volume down a little bit. Wrong slider.
Let's make magic. That's a play that I wrote. No denials, just vows. Anything that you ask, except for the prison of jazz. Because girl, you're a sexy.
Chesterton's Gateway is produced by Ethan Nicolle and Michael Grumbine. It is based on the book of the same name, which can be found on that capitalist monstrosity, Amazon.com. Send questions and comments to Chesterton's Gateway at gmail.com. And join us on Patreon, where only the true Chestertonians can be found. Goodbye.
I think what I love most as we exit here is that if our listeners want to learn about all kinds of GK Chesterton canon of work, they can just listen to your songs, because you put so many inside jokes in there, like the Prison of Jazz. I challenge you listeners, tell us where the Prison of Jazz comes from.
Yeah, I would love to see if Dale Alquist could decipher all my little hints I put in.
Yeah, well, I hope you pick a good musical genre for when he appears on our show.
Yeah, that's gonna be pressure. I'm gonna try to put every reference I can think of in that song.
No. You have to have a genre works for that.
I'm your
Yeah, we'll do like an Eminem song. All right.
Bye now.
Till next time.